welcome to another episode of the Anything is Possible podcast. Today, I am with the most inspirational woman, Sophie Hughes, who is a curve model, motivational speaker, and body confidence influencer. Now, there are a lot of people on Instagram that may give themselves those kind of titles, but Sophie's story is so individual and so inspirational, and I cannot wait to share it with you today. Sophie's story kind of starts with her baby nephew, Oscar. And so let me hand over to Sophie to introduce herself and tell you about Oscar.
Thank you so much. What an intro. And I'm so excited to be here, so excited to dive in. So this is just the craziest story and probably the craziest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. And it's hard to even put it into words. And whenever I talk about it, it always feels like I'm sharing someone else's story. So when I was 25, my baby nephew Oscar was born. And unfortunately, he was born with a condition called biliary atresia, which basically meant that his bile duct wasn't working as it should to produce bile. And he had a CAS-I procedure, which is quite a small operation that was hopefully going to fix it and that he would be well and lead a normal life. And unfortunately, it didn't work. And we found ourselves in a position as a family with Oscar where he was in the first few months of his life and fighting for his life and needing a liver donation. So he was on what's called the cadaveric donor list, which basically means that you're waiting for a deceased donor to become available. And when you're a baby, you need either a child's liver or a very small adult's liver. So kind of the pot of people that you're waiting to come through, and I know that sounds awful, but that's really how it gets, is very narrow. So we were in a position as a family where we were waiting for a liver to become available, and it was just completely unbearable, to be honest. It was one of the hardest things we've ever been through as a family, as you can imagine, and not something that you would ever wish on your worst enemy. He's just like the cutest little thing, but so unwell, bright yellow eyes, completely swollen tummy. And we nearly lost him on multiple occasions because of blood clots and other complications. So it was really, really challenging. And I was actually living in Australia at the time. So everything that I was learning, all the communication was via email or on the phone, FaceTime. So it was really, really tricky.
And had you met him?
I'd met him, yeah. So I actually flew back when he was 2 weeks old to surprise the family because I'm so close with all my nieces and nephews and like not being here for them being born was just a big no for me. So I flew back, surprised everyone, got to meet him. It was a really cute video of that actually. So I'd had like a few weeks of bonding with him, which was so lovely. And he was getting increasingly, more and more unwell. And as a family, we were made aware of what's called the Living Liver Donor Program, bit of a mouthful, basically where a living person can donate part of their liver to another living person, which to me was just absolutely mind-blowing. I think lots of people have heard of kidney donation, but liver donation was just a whole different thing. And I immediately put my hand up. I immediately wanted to be considered, and we were told straight from the set that it was very, very unlikely that I would be a match.
Why was that?
Because there's so much that goes into it. So in order to be tested, I had to have like 20 different tests. I had MRI scans, CAT scans, PET scans. I had like smear tests, and every single cell in your body needs to be perfectly healthy. You have to have immaculate health. And then on top of that, you have to be a perfect blood match, and they make up like a 3D model of your liver, and every vein has to be perfectly positioned to be able to take it out, has to be perfectly matched to his. So it's really unlikely. So I'd flown back from Australia for all of these tests, and even then they were saying, you're not going to be a match. Like, we have to prepare you. It's very unlikely you'll be a match. And they talk a lot. They really try to put you off. I think because it's such a big surgery, there's a 1 in 200 chance of death for the donor. And I was 25, I was modelling full time. It was just going to impact everything. So it's kind of the hospital's and the surgeon's responsibility to try and deter you and make sure that you're mentally stable enough to be able to do it. Because one of the biggest things is there's a 1 in 200 risk of death for me, but there's a 1 in 40 risk of death for Oscar.
Wow.
So you're going into this surgery knowing that there's a very substantial chance that you could wake up on the other side. You've got half a liver, a brand new scar, recovery to go through. And he's not made it.
And can I ask at this point, how many people from the family got tested? Was it just you, or did other?
Other people put their hands up, but because I was so slim at the time, I was a size 6 and I'd always been a size 6. My liver was likely to have no fat around it. It was likely to be very small. On paper, I looked like a really good match for a baby. So they chose me to start with. And then if I wasn't a match, then they would have moved on to the next best candidate, basically. So we went through all of this testing. I'd come back from Australia, and my brother initially, I'm his baby sister, he was like, no way.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm risking losing you and Oscar. I can't do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's too much. We're not doing it. And then basically we just got to a point where we really were running out of options, and he had weeks. You know, it was really close to the edge, and we got the call to say that I was a match.
Wow.
Which was just wild.
How did you feel? Like, and I hope you don't mind me asking this, was the part of you that was like, amazing, I'm going to potentially save his life, and was the part of you that was like, oh, you know, shit, I'm going to have to go through this operation? Or was it all focused on the positive?
So I think I had a really strong gut instinct from the start that I was going to be a match. And I don't know if everyone feels like that. Yeah. But every time they said to me, you might not be a match, I thought, but I am. I am a match. I know I'm a match. I know that this is what I was put here to do. I know that this is part of my journey. I am a match. Everything's going to be okay. So I always had a really strong sense of that. And I hadn't cried at all in the whole sort of lead up to it, like all the meetings, everything. And I had what's called like a liver coordinator. She's called Katie. She was amazing.
What a job.
And I know, she was incredible. And she took me around to all my meetings, and she was really there for support. Yeah. And I hadn't been emotional. I hadn't really showed like any emotion towards it. I was quite matter of fact about it. This is what we're doing. Everything's going to be fine. Yeah. And it wasn't until we went down to surgery and I'd said goodbye to Oscar, said goodbye to all my family, and, you know, going through on my own. And I remember going through like the big double doors and like giving my mum a hug for the last time and everything, or like, you know, in your head you really are thinking like that at that point, giving my mum a hug and just thinking, you know, what's going to lie on the other side of this surgery? What am I walking into? And walking through the double doors and just being like, and I had an almighty breakdown. Yeah, I was 25, and finally just let out all of the emotion. Yeah. And Katie, the liver coordinator, was like, thank God. Thank God. Oh my God, we needed this. She was like, it's okay. It's okay to show your emotion. It's okay to be upset. It's terrifying. Like, it's terrifying. You've been so brave. So it was good to kind of get that emotion out. So even when I was being put to sleep, I was sobbing. Like, I was really, really emotional at that point. But up until that point, I hadn't really thought about risk of death, risk of anything. It was just like, this is what we're going to do.
And for the majority of people that will not understand this operation, are you go under, they take half your liver, is Oscar near you? Like, what happens?
I know, it's crazy. So quite often you will be in rooms next to each other, but with Leeds set up, they actually have a dedicated children's hospital. So we were in hospitals about 2 miles apart.
Oh, wow, really?
So they initially opened me up, and I've got like a 7-8 inch scar down my stomach. So they sort of like slice you in half, basically, pin your ribs up so they can get access to the liver. So it's really quite graphic. And then they took my left lobe of my liver out, which is about 40% of my liver. And what they do is they get my liver out and they say, okay, it looks good, we're good to go. And they then at that point will start surgery on Oscar on the other side, and then they take the liver via ambulance to Oscar.
That's nuts, isn't it? To think that like your liver was like transformed.
I've actually got photos of it in a bowl.
No way.
Yeah. And I didn't want to see them for a really long time. They take all these pictures for research. And then Katie emailed me. She was like, do you want to see the pictures of myself open with my liver in, and then my liver in a bowl, no liver inside me? I remember looking at them and being like, oh my God.
You're really brave to look at those.
It was
probably part of the healing process, which will obviously.
I think trying to make it feel more real.
Yeah.
For sure.
So there's so much to dive into, but so we'll not leave Oscar for a minute, but just
Oscar's doing really well, by the way. I always forget to say that. People are like, that's a cliffhanger. He's doing really, really well.
So you you wake up and what did they know Oscar is going to be okay at that point? Because I imagine that was one of the when you know you're okay and you've woke up. So
I woke up and I was in, I think because of how I fell asleep and because I'd been under for 9 hours, I had a few complications, nothing too major, but it just took them a bit longer to sew me back up. So I'd been under quite a long time, and then Oscar's surgery on the flip side was actually a bit quicker than they thought.
Right.
So by the time I came round, the very first thing that came out of my mouth was, is he okay? And Katie was there. Katie's like a big feature in this. I have to send her this podcast. But Katie was there and she said, yeah, he's doing really well.
Oh, wow.
So I don't remember anything then for about 2 days. I just went back to sleep. I was in intensive care. But I just knew in my head, yeah, he's doing really well. That's all I kept telling myself. He's doing really well. He's doing really well. And I just focused on my recovery for a few days until I was well enough. I think it was about day 5, and they took me over in an ambulance to be able to see him.
Oh, so he, in terms of this, like so many compartments to this,
Yeah.
but so so he's in hospital recovering.
Yeah.
And what's his stay in hospital? Like, how long was he in hospital for
So he'd been in hospital since he was 3 weeks old, pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah, so he hadn't really left. And then I think he stayed in hospital for about another month post-surgery.
Yeah.
And then he came home and he had 2 to 3 months complete isolation because his body was so fragile and he needed to make sure that he didn't get any germs. So really, like, no one could see him. He couldn't go anywhere. So really the first year of his life was incredibly turbulent. But he was alive and he had a new liver, and he was really blessed compared to other children in that position. And we were really blessed as a family that we had someone that was a match, because there's lots of people, lots of babies all around the world that do die because there isn't a donor available.
Wow. So talk us about the first time you saw him after. I bet that was so emotional.
It was so emotional, and I was off my rocker on morphine. So I remember just being wheeled in, and I could barely walk. I didn't have a clue what was going on, but just seeing him. And I remember so vividly looking at him, and for the first time he had white eyes and not yellow eyes. And yeah, it was incredibly emotional. All of the nurses were crying. Everyone was just overcome with emotion, really, because you've come so far to that point that it's hard to even believe that's happened, and that he's well, and that you're okay. And it's like, it almost feels too good to be true. And he still had a bumpy ride ahead, and you know, he will take anti-rejection drugs for the rest of his life, and he'll have to be incredibly careful for the rest of his life. But he's here, and he's got the chance to lead a healthy life, and that's what's important.
So that was going to be my question before we kind of come on to your journey. So he's 7.5.
Yes.
Yeah. And so how is he? Does he live a normal life? You mentioned anti-rejection drugs. What are they?
Yeah, so he takes drugs every day, basically to make sure that his body doesn't recognise the foreign object in his body, because it's my liver and not his liver effectively.
Yeah.
And so if his body was to recognise that, then it would start to reject it. And at that point, he would need another transplant. So there's every chance he could live a long, healthy life just with my liver, but there's also a really strong chance that he will need another transplant at some point in his life.
Right.
So he leaves a normal life. He's a goalkeeper, which is probably the worst position possible, having balls kicked at his liver. But he's doing really well. He's really happy. He's cheeky. And he used to, when he was little, always say he got his liver from Australia. I got my liver from Australia.
And have you two got like a really special bond?
Yeah, really special. It's actually our 7-year liverversary on Friday. So I'll go and pick him up from school, and we'll celebrate that, which is really lovely.
What a lovely story. Yeah. So your recovery, you were 9 hours in surgery. Just talk us in detail through that.
Yeah, harrowing, to be honest. The hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. It was intense. I was in intensive care for a few days, and I had a really bumpy recovery. I couldn't stop being sick, and there was just a lot. I had a bad reaction to the morphine. Yeah. My scar was stretching.
I bet if you'd been sick, that was
it was really bad being sick, and like had a really nasty cough as well. I think from just being in surgery for so long, your body's just giving up, and also trying to regrow a liver.
Yeah, of course.
Which is not for the faint of heart. And then I spent 3.5 months in the UK, because like I say, I was living in Australia at the time. So
how long in hospital?
I was in hospital for 8 days.
Yeah.
And then I went home. But really, when I went home, I was still, sometimes they send you home from hospital and you think, should I really be here? Like, I'm not in a good way. Yeah. So they sent me home. I was at home for 3.5 months recovering. And I mean, I couldn't lift a kettle, couldn't wash my own hair, couldn't bath myself. I really needed a lot of support, and I underestimated that. Really underestimated how long it would take me, because I was really fit and healthy at the time, and I thought I would bounce back a little bit, and I just didn't at all. And it took me, I would say, a year until I had my first day where I thought, I feel normal.
Really?
Yeah.
And was that cognitively, physically, everything?
Both. For sure. I think it took me a long time to really process. And I know we'll dive into that in terms of my body and all the changes that I went through. Mentally, it took me a long time. But actually physically, to just be able to go and do a Pilates class or do the things that I love and feel normal and not constantly be thinking, my body's not where it was a good year. Yeah.
And what are... like, obviously that was the recovery from the operation, and what are the were you told of any like long-term side effects or very specific side effects that could happen post-op?
I mean, there was loads of like risk of this, risk of like I said before, they really tried to prepare you, so there was lots of things that were really quite terrifying, like all sorts of things. But the main things that they said were the average person gains between 10 and 15 kilos post-surgery because your liver's responsible for, breaking down your fatty acids, and it plays a big role in that. So you take half of it out and your metabolism is going to struggle, basically.
So it's your metabolism. Yeah.
So they told me about weight gain. They told me about scar pain and scar tissue and things like that. But there's nothing too major because your liver does regenerate. So if you're lucky and you have a good recovery and you don't have any complications, you lead a normal life for the most part.
Yeah. So we'll come to the weight because that is obviously part of your journey. You mentioned before you were a size 6, you were a model.
Yeah.
So what was your journey to becoming a model? And size 6 is very slim. Yeah. Was that because you were a model? Is it because you'd had issues with weight? Like, just tell us that piece before we get on to the next.
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say from being 13, I suffered with disordered eating. Yeah. Started in high school, which I think is quite common. Yeah. And it was very much a need for control. Yeah. It was something that I could be in control of in my teenage years, where you quite often feel like the things around you are spiraling and you have no control and no concept of self or where you're going or what else you can control. So for me, it was food. And I remember really specifically where it started. I think I'd been exposed to a lot of things within the media and magazines and stuff. So I'd seen a lot of things anyway. But when I got my first boyfriend, like my first proper little boyfriend, we used to hold hands in the canteen and things. And we all used to eat lunch in the form room. There's a big group of us. And all of a sudden, I had this boyfriend and I didn't want to eat in front of him. And that was where it started. And it's such a small thing looking back, but that really escalated from there and snowballed from there because I didn't want to eat in front of him, so I didn't eat lunch. And then I didn't eat lunch ever, and so I lost weight. And then I liked the fact that I'd lost weight and I got addicted to that. So then I didn't eat dinner, and it just became a whole thing. So...
And did anyone pick up on that, like friends or family, or did they just think, oh, you're growing up, you're watching, Yeah,
I remember my mom had suffered with disordered eating when she was younger as well, so I think it was very triggering for her, and I don't think she really knew how to address it or where to even start. Yeah. And I remember my mom and dad had separated. Yeah. My dad dropping me off after one weekend and saying, I'm really worried about Soph, like she looks she doesn't look well, like what's going on? Yeah. My mum was like, no, she eats, like she's fine. And I was very clever, very clever. So I would say, I don't want dinner because I ate so much at lunch and I had cake and I had this and so I'd get away with it that way. Or I'd eat dinner, but I'd just flush it down the toilet, put it in a plastic bag and drop it in the bin on the way to school the next morning. So I was crafty, I was clever, and the internet was really starting to be a big thing. There was all these websites with tips on what to do and how to get away with it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think people recognised it, but I don't think there was the educational awareness that there is now to know what to do about it. So my dad had said, she's disappearing in front of us effectively. And I overheard this conversation and I remember thinking, okay, I need to get more clever. I need to eat more around my dad so he doesn't worry.
Oh, wow.
So, as a 13-year-old, you're really smart and you know how to manipulate them, which is what it was about, because I just wanted to carry on and I wanted to get away with it for as long as I could without having to have a conversation. And then my friends at school, and we talk about this now actually with one of my girlfriends who I'm still close with from that time, I just didn't eat at school and that was just a thing. So we had two queues. We had the hot food queue and the cold food queue. And two of the girls would get in the cold food queue, two of the girls would get in this queue, and I would get the table because I wasn't eating.
Oh, wow.
Soph doesn't eat lunch. And it was just like, Soph just doesn't eat. It was just accepted. It wasn't, I don't think they knew what to say, or like I say, had the awareness to even begin to discuss it with me.
And you say disordered eating rather than eating disorder. Is there a difference between disordered eating, anorexia?
I don't think there's a difference, and I think you would label it as anorexia. I just don't necessarily think, for me, giving it a label is something that I feel the need to do or want to do. I was never hospitalised with anorexia, and so it's probably just a mental thing for me, to be honest, and a lack of acceptance of that's what it was. But very much so. Yeah.
So is that what, how did you get into modelling then? I mean, you were absolutely beautiful, so I'm sure you were spotted, but how did that journey?
Yeah, so I was tiny. I mean, I was probably like a size 4 at this point, and I was in London on a weekend with my mom. 5'9", absolutely teeny tiny, and I got scouted on the street in London, basically. And I hadn't considered modelling. That was the first time I'd ever been scouted. It wasn't something that I'd ever thought about or something that I thought I wanted to do. I looked at a lot of models online as what at the time was called like Finspiration. Which is terrifying. Yeah. And you remember like Pro Anna and that whole thing. It was a whole thing. But I'd never considered that was what I wanted to do. I'd never thought I could make a career out of that. I mean, I was 15. I had no idea. And at the time, I wanted to be a criminal lawyer. So
I just wrote down, what did you want to do?
Criminal lawyer, that's what I wanted to do. Basically, just wanted to stand in court and boss people around. And then I found out there was loads of paperwork and I thought, no, I don't want to do that. But I got scouted and I really just got catapulted into this world, which was possibly the worst thing that could have happened to me at the time in terms of my health and my mental health.
Because where you were at mentally, and then you suddenly...
And then all of a sudden it became a numbers game, because I was on this board of all these other women and being put forward for jobs, and I could actually go onto the website and see what everyone's measurements were, and it became this obsession with wanting to be the smallest. And every job that I didn't book, because you don't book every job, every job that I didn't book in my head was because I was too fat. So I needed to lose weight, or I needed to be slimmer than the girl who had booked it. So it just really fed into the obsession. And the industry at the time was a really dangerous place and had no protocols in place to protect people. I mean, I was 15 and I would go in and they'd do my measurements and say, you need to lose 2 inches by next week if you want to be put forward for this runway. Why don't you do an apple diet?
Do you know, it's so funny you should say that, because I can't remember what episode, but in season 1, we interview Anna Lahari, who's... Barry's Bootcamp master trainer, and very much part of the founding of Barry's Bootcamp in the UK, and she was model. And she said they were just the cabbage soup they were all told to have, and that she was like, we were tiny, and all we were allowed to eat for like before a shoot was cabbage, and like. So I know what you're saying. Like I've heard it from you read about it and you think, oh, whatever. But it's genuinely
100%. And it was so normalized at the time. Like you'd be on a shoot, there was no lunch, so you didn't get fed on a shoot. You were modeling, and you could be doing a 16-hour day and you're not being fed. Like I used to always have an emergency banana in my bag just so that I didn't pass out, just to put something in my body. But that was just very standard and very normal. And I think that really then fed into my mindset that what I was doing was the most normal thing in the world, because now I was surrounded by people who thought exactly the same as I did, and I was praised when I lost weight. And I'd get shots back and they'd be like, you look amazing. I'd be like, it's because I've not eaten for a week. Yay.
You must have been so tired.
Exhausted. I had no energy. Exhausted. Absolutely exhausted. And I never worked out in terms of like lifting weights or doing anything to add anything to my body. It was always, how can I just do cardio? How can I get on the treadmill and just run? How can I sweat and burn the most calories that I can possibly burn? Rather than now my mindset of how can I feel strong and how can I support my body into old age and how can I feel amazing? It wasn't about that. It was just, how can I burn 1,000 calories? Or how can I burn that banana that I've just eaten?
So as you start to model and your parents were, certainly your dad, they were very concerned about your weight. Did those concerns grow the more you were modeling? Because you were probably growing up but staying slim.
Yeah, I think I was growing up but sort of growing off in my own direction by that point. And I moved down to London and then I was going to university. So I don't think the concerns were there in the same way. And I think I always kept enough weight on me that it wasn't like I was about to drop dead, so it wasn't an immediate concern. But I certainly look back at images and just think, wow, like I was so unhealthy and so unhappy. And that went on until 25, until liver surgery, really.
And so you say you were unhappy. So were the parts of the modelling you enjoyed, or so was it a bit of a battle in your head, like I'm loving doing the modelling and the job, but actually the hard work it's taking to keep this slim is making me unhappy? Or like, how did that all work?
I think it wasn't necessarily conscious, if that makes sense. I think it's all retrospective, that I look back and realise that was how I felt. Like now I look back at a picture of myself and realise that I spent 3 hours trying to get ready for that event and crying because I looked disgusting. And you look back on these things and you think, God, like my mental health was really not great there, but I didn't necessarily realise that at the time. And I didn't necessarily have the tools to understand what was going on with my mental health. And again, like I say, I don't think there was the same awareness then that there is now. You know, it was normal for us to all be getting ready for a night out and calling ourselves fat and disgusting. And that was the kind of energy then, and no one ever called me out on it. No one ever picked up on it.
And it sounds like there wasn't some deep-rooted like thing that had happened to you to trigger it. It was just normal life, and then getting a kick from oh, I feel a bit thinner, and oh, I've had a compliment about that, and it kind of fuels the ego a little bit, I guess, doesn't
100%.
it?
It didn't come from a trauma. It just crept up on me really gradually, as do a lot of mental health issues, I think, and then all of a sudden it's a crisis.
Yeah. So you moved to Australia age
21.
And what did you move to Australia for?
So I went traveling. After I finished my degree, I went traveling. I went all over Asia. I went to New Zealand, Australia, and then I ended up falling in love in Australia and staying, and I ended up being there for 9 years, which was never part of the plan, but it was such an incredible adventure. And so much fun. Absolutely no regrets, but it was 9 years in Australia, 9 years in Sydney.
And were you modelling over there as well?
Yeah.
And was that full time?
Modelling, doing a bit of social media, public speaking, and then a few other jobs here and there.
Yeah. Okay, so you're over there, obviously 25.
Yeah.
You've talked us through where you were to get to doing the transplant. So for anybody, even that hasn't got disordered eating, the thought of putting on weight as a woman is quite terrifying. So obviously they were telling you at this point, doing the transplant, this was going to be likely. How does someone that is so driven by their weight get their head around that?
I mean, to be honest, I think transplant definitely was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it left me with no choice but to learn to accept myself. And I think this is why I'm so passionate about what I do, because most people will never go through a huge life-changing event like that will allow them to go on the journey that I've been on. And that's why I talk about it so much, and that's why I try and help people, because I think it's really, really difficult to even begin to get your head around it or begin to accept it. And like you say, I was so driven by my weight, driven by the way I looked, and then transplant just flipped everything on its head, because it reminded me how short life is. It kind of just woke me up. I felt like I'd just been shook awake. And then after surgery, when I gained all of this weight, I still had a lot to come to terms with. But I think because of what I'd been through, and because I'd had the opportunity to be able to save Oscar's life, it kind of paled in comparison. It didn't feel as important. But yes, for any woman gaining weight or body changes, aging, all of these things, they can be absolutely terrifying. And I think what we have to remember is that it is a constant work in progress. You have to constantly commit to be kinder to yourself. You have to constantly commit to working on your self-talk every single day, to putting good practices into place, to be able to navigate it, and to be able to genuinely wake up in the morning and understand that the way you look and your body is the least exciting thing about you. It's so important to take care of your health and nourish yourself and make sure that you're strong, but it's the least exciting, least important, the least thing that we should be talking about.
So you mentioned that you were told you're going to have the weight gain because of the liver function and the drop in metabolism. And I think I've heard you say that sort of the weight gain came quite quickly.
Very quickly,
And it mentally, that was a challenge for you. Can you talk us through that?
So I think I'm 25. I've gone from being a size 6 to a size 14, 16 in the space of probably a year and a half, which is crazy. I never in a million years thought that I would be a size 16. I'd never envisioned myself in a bigger body. I'd never thought about it. The thought of curve modeling was just so far removed from where I was that was such a huge shift. And then I also had this massive scar. And at first my scar was obviously quite dark and like hadn't healed at all. So it was very obvious. So if I was on the beach, obviously I lived in Australia, if I was on the beach in a bikini, people were staring because it was massive and it was, right there. So I just felt very alien in my own body. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself at all. And that was really, really challenging. And I think because I had struggled with my weight prior, it definitely came with so many layers to it. And I think really for me, social media, and this is why I'm so passionate about social media and the positive sides of social media, social media helped me heal, because I found women who had a body like my new body, and I thought they looked beautiful. And I would see them wiggling and jiggling and their cellulite and just loving life and full of life and so much just fun. They were having fun. And I would look at them and think that they looked incredible. And I started to realize that if I could look at them and think they looked incredible, then over time and with a lot of work, I could think that about myself as well.
Wow. So talk to us about the lot of work, because this can apply what you you've done for yourself mentally can be applied to so many situations, not just weight gain. So what was the work that you did?
So I think really committing to being kinder to myself was really important. And like you say, this isn't just weight, this is anything.
Yeah.
We are our own worst critics. And my self-talk about my body was awful. I would never speak to you, my best friend, my mom, anyone else like that. That would be horrific. I would expect no one to ever speak to me again if I spoke to them in the way about their body that I was speaking to myself. And I think realizing that and committing to stopping that and saying, I will not speak to myself like that. I will speak kindness into my body. And when I look in the mirror, I will practice gratitude rather than picking it apart. I will stop grabbing at my hips or lifting my boobs or any of these things that we do with our bodies. I commit to stopping doing that. And instead, I will look in the mirror and I will express gratitude. And gratitude has changed everything for me in every aspect of my life, but particularly with my body, because I'm so grateful that my body was able to save a life. That's where I start. I put my hand on my scar and I just think, whatever it is that you're picking apart, you wish your boobs were perkier, is so irrelevant in the grand scheme of things when your body, my body, is physically capable of saving a life or giving birth. It's incredible what our bodies can do. And I think if you hone in on the gratitude of that, your whole perspective can change. So gratitude was huge for me, and forgiveness as well. And again, this can apply to anything, but forgiving myself for all the years that I had spent being so cruel and so negative and having such a negative self-talk was really important, because I had to leave that behind. And I had to say, that's who you were there, and that's how you spoke to yourself, and that's okay. I apologize to my body. I apologize to myself for being so cruel and so awful, but now we're going to start a new chapter and we're going to move forward from it. So gratitude and forgiveness for me have been absolutely huge.
And in terms of gratitude, and it's something that I am struggling with actually at the moment for different reasons. And I said actually that to I've been for coffee with my mum and dad this morning and said, I need to be more grateful. I need to start being grateful, because for some reason I'm focusing on a lot of the negative.
Yes.
So I did used to do the 5 things down every day. Yeah. But I feel like with you, it's gone a bit deeper than that. So if you could explain your best practice of gratitude, what does that involve?
So I guess if I give you a visual representation of what I do. So when I have a negative thought come into my head, I literally take, I don't know why, but it's a rounders bat or a baseball bat.
I love that. I'm very visual. Yeah.
I literally take a bat in my head and I'm like, I'm batting that thought away and I'm going to replace it with gratitude. So it's getting really, really conscious over your thought processes and what's coming into your head and then immediately replacing it with gratitude. Yeah. And the more you do this, it just becomes your practice. Yeah. So on the way here, I'd had a really busy morning. There was so much going on. I had so much in my head. And in the drive over, I was just thinking about all the things I'm grateful for, doing my affirmations and just sort of resetting my mind, because I didn't want it filled with busyness or filled with, I'm too busy, I've got this, or this is stressing me out. Why is this client not paid this invoice? Why is it all this noise that we get? Yeah. Instead, it was, I'm so grateful that I'm here. I'm so grateful that I have this opportunity today. I'm so grateful that I get to come and speak to Holly and do something that absolutely lights me up. So I think for me, it's that visual, really committing in your own brain that when those thoughts come in, they are going to get a giant bat out and you're going to replace it immediately with, what am I grateful for?
Yeah. So that you obviously did all this work, and we'll come to how that changed your career in a moment. But I think what I'm interested in is, when did it get to the point where, and I know you're saying you're still working out on it, but when did you eventually reach a point of acceptance, would you say?
Yeah, and it was, I didn't wake up one day and just love myself. But I think I woke up one day and realized that there'd been 2 or 3 months since I'd had a day where I hated myself. And that was huge, because I spent every single day hating myself, or hating my body, certainly, for 10 years. And then all of a sudden I'd got to a place where I'd been like, I can't remember the last time I cried because of my body. I can't remember the last time I put clothes on and felt horrendous. I can't remember the last time I cancelled plans because I didn't want to go because of how I felt or how I looked. And that was huge. So it was a compound effect of doing these things on a daily basis, being kinder to myself, affirmations, gratitude, forgiving myself, all of the things that I was doing, following the right people on social media, just replacing all these negative things in my brain with all of these positive things. Yeah. And anytime, social media is a great representation, because anytime anything pops up that I don't like, that doesn't serve me, that doesn't encourage me to be my best self, block and delete.
Yeah.
I have nothing on my social media that doesn't make me feel incredible. My social media is my happy place.
Yeah.
And I choose to fill it with women who look like me, women who inspire me, women whose bodies inspire me, women who have a positive message in whatever way it is.
Yeah.
Whereas before I was following swimwear models who were a completely unattainable body type for me.
Yeah.
And it's a very personal experience, but it was very unattainable for me and it didn't make me feel good.
Yeah.
So for me, it was about filling my brain, filling my life, filling my social media with all of these things that make me feel good.
Yeah.
And then over time, that compounded. And like I say, I woke up one day and was kind of like, I can't remember the last time I felt like shit about myself. This is incredible.
Yeah. Wow. I've got like all these questions popping in my head, so I'm just having to write them down so I don't forget to ask you.
Love it.
And so you obviously then, you know, your passion and your career was modelling.
Yes.
So I guess at one point you were thinking it's over for me.
100%.
So how did we flip that into I'm going to be a curve model?
So I stopped modelling for quite some time and then I started doing social media basically. So I'd followed these influencers, like I say, who were really inspiring me and they had bodies like my new body. And I thought, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And I kind of did it for myself. And then it led to where I am now.
Yeah.
And I love that really because I didn't set out to make a career out of it. I set out to accept myself more. And I thought if these women can accept themselves, I can accept myself.
Yeah.
So I started doing that and then I got picked up by a curve agency in Sydney, Bella, who are absolutely incredible. And they really nurtured me along the journey of curve and I found myself just surrounded by the most incredible people.
Yeah.
And curve modelling for me, particularly in Sydney, but in the UK as well, we're certainly getting there, is just a whole different world.
Oh.
Like the best vibes you can possibly imagine. And I remember doing my first lingerie campaign for bras and things and there was like 50 people on the crew. It was huge and I remember thinking, oh my God, here I am in my knickers with all my jiggly bits out, feeling fab. And we had Whitney blasting and everyone's cheering me on and saying how incredible I looked. We had a massive lunch.
I was just going to say, did you get lunch?
We ate, we had breakfast, lunch, dinner, and I just had so much fun. And I remember thinking, this is how it should feel because I feel more confident in myself than I've ever felt as a curve model, which is not something that I ever expected, but it was just because I got to a place where I finally accepted myself.
Did it feel like a weight was lifted off your shoulders?
Massively.
Yeah.
100%.
Because it's a little bit like, so I've talked about having OCD and one of the therapies you have to do for OCD is exposure therapy.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you have to literally face your worst fears. And the more that you face your fears and you realise that the worst won't happen. And obviously my OCD was totally different, but I'm just imagining that like moment where you go like, you're literally taking your clothes off, but you're actually taking so much more off. Like I can imagine you just felt like, oh.
You're so right. And I think for me, that's what social media was as well. It was
Yeah.
like, I've got this new belly roll. And when people take pictures of me and I see it, I feel disgusting. And I think all these horrible things. And I'm trying to learn to accept it. But actually, what if I just posted my worst angle? And then everyone's seen the worst bit of me anyway. It can't get any worse than that. And then everyone responded so positively. And I was like, is that really the worst angle? Or do I just look happy and comfortable and content?
Yeah.
And it really led on from there. So you're right. I guess it was exposure therapy in a different way. It was like, you know what? The worst things that you could say or think about me, I'm just going to put out there and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And then I got a really positive response, as you often do. Or it's not as terrifying as you think it will be. And then it catapults from there.
It's so funny, isn't it? Because it's like, as a, I was always praised for being slim when I was little.
Yes.
So I do work hard to keep slim, but I feel like I've got quite good balance. But for me, it's a silly thing, but like things like when I first got a bit of cellulite, it was like the worst thing that could have happened. Like it was just, and it's so ridiculous. Yeah. But you associate it with, I'm not perfect. What if, oh no, people are now going to look at me and go, oh, look at Holly. She's let herself go. It's stupid thoughts. And I remember going on holiday for the first time after COVID, and because obviously in COVID, like you say, your social media is all this stuff that you're looking at, and actually getting around a pool and going, oh,
people have normal bodies.
Yeah, and I remember
I'm normal.
And I remember this group of girls that were gorgeous, like all in, the gorgeous cutout bikinis, and they just looked super glamorous around the pool and gorgeous. And there was this one girl that stood out to me, and she was dead tall, and she had all this confidence, and she was young, but she had cellulite. It must have been like genetic, and she looked gorgeous. And I was like, what? And everyone was like, she was chatting to guys and everything like this. And I thought, what an amazing, she is obviously somebody that's maybe doesn't even notice it. And is just completely like
comfortable.
Yeah. And I think when you say you were looking at people and thinking, it's almost like I want to feel like they do rather than I want to look like, as in you'd be looking at curve models going, I want to feel as confident as them. And that's why I kind of mentioned the feeling, because I resonated with it in terms of it must be so freeing to suddenly go, those shackles that were around me, like I'm just going to let them go and actually feel better for it.
Yeah, 100%. I absolutely love that. And I think people always say that to me when social media, when I post sort of like my before and after pictures that I do, where I'm like super posed and sucking in and like looking modelly versus just relaxing and drinking my Fanta lemon and having my lays on the beach, which is reality, right? Yeah. And people always say to me, you look so much happier. And it's because I am. I feel so much happier in my skin when I'm just able to be who I am. Yeah. And I think it's really beautiful when you see someone who has accepted themselves. And like you say with this girl on holiday, she's just in a headspace of she's been able to accept herself and understand that her cellulite is really just not that big a deal or important, or in the grand scheme of her life, no one is going to stand up at her funeral and talk about her cellulite. No one cares. We've all got cellulite. 90% of women have cellulite. It's the most normal thing in the world. But social media and the media in general makes us think it's not. And so seeing these people who are confident and feel comfortable in their own skin is so empowering for other women. And it has this roll-on effect.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So with curve modelling, does that open up different sort of parts of the industry that you wouldn't have done before? Like for curve modelling, what kind of brands do you work for? What industries?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's very similar, and I think we've got to a space, and as well, I have to be very clear, I'm a size 14, 16. Yeah. So a lot of people, when we talk about curve modelling, or when I say what I do for work, I'm a curve model, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
It is crazy. And I think at some point, and this was why I loved my Sydney agency so much, actually, because they just had models.
So
they just had models. They had size 6 models, they had size 20 models. And it was just modelling.
It wasn't given a label.
No, there was no label. But here it's still really important. I feel like I still have to emphasize that I'm a curve model. And then people are like, really?
Yeah.
But I think curve modelling is very much the same now, which I absolutely love. Curve girls are being booked for exactly the same campaigns. We're working with exactly the same clients. There's lots of high-end clients that are doing curve models as well. And it's just becoming a lot more normal. And I think a lot less just trying to tick a box, which is what curve modelling was initially. Initially, it was just like, okay, have we got a curve model? Have we got a mixed race model? And have we got a white size 6 model? Done. That was the campaign. Every campaign you ever saw. And now I actually think there's more focus on not just diversifying for the sake of diversifying and trying to tick a box, but actually just let's represent women. What do women look like? And I really hope, I see that that's where the industry's going, but I really hope that that's the direction that the industry continues to go in.
Probably for you, that there's work that you can do, isn't there, around the fact of dropping that curve label 100%. And it becoming modelling.
And with my scar as well, I think that's really important, because I get so many messages on social media from women saying, this is the first time I've ever seen a scar like yours, or a brand like Simply Be, for example, is one of the brands I'm working with at the moment, and they'll post me in a bikini and the comments are like, oh my God, like, look at a scar, that's beautiful. I've got a scar like that, or they've got a C-section scar or whatever it might be. And they don't see it represented. And that's the key. It's just representation. Regardless of what diversity we're talking about, representation is the most important thing. And for me, being able to represent women with scars and women with curves is really, really important.
So then you've kind of stepped into, like, and I know you were doing this in Australia, but the motivational piece. So is that come post-operation, the motivational piece as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess it kind of all ties in, because I do a lot of podcasting. I talk a lot on social media about body confidence, about body positivity. It's just been a natural progression, really, to be able to then spread that message further. And I'm just about to start working with an amazing charity called Milk Education, where I'll be going into schools, predominantly high schools, but other settings as well, like dance schools, football teams, things like that, and speaking to young women about body confidence and about accepting themselves and normalizing bodies, which for me is something that I am so passionate about. Like, it's something I feel really purpose driven with, because I so desperately wish someone had come in and spoken to me at that age. If you could have got hold of 13-year-old Soph and told her that she was enough, and someone of influence coming in and talking to her about how her body wasn't the most important thing, I think that would have been really powerful and really important. So I guess my mission with that is to kind of go and speak to all these 13-year-old Sophs and see what I can do with it. So yeah, the motivational speaking and really just trying to empower as many people as I can. I think it's the easiest way to do it, to reach big audiences and just make sure that this message is heard. And there's lots of incredible people who are doing it, and it's important work.
But I think you could span across all generations, because I think, you know, there's a lot in the media at the moment about midlife and menopause transition. And obviously something that a lot of women struggle with at that point is weight gain that they've no control over. And
Absolutely.
I actually think you could inspire across so many generations, even though you're much younger than that. So your business, if you like, so you've got the motivational, you've got the modelling, and you've got like the educational piece. Who's in your team then?
So
it can't just be all you doing all this.
No, it's definitely not just me. It's absolutely not. So Moda PR are absolutely incredible, and they handle all of my PR. They also handle all of my social media management. So I literally could not live without Ash, Jen and Tom. They are just my backbone. Nothing would happen without them. They're incredible. And so they focus on all of my social side, all of the speaking. And then I also have Boss, who are my modelling agency, and Zebedee and a couple of other smaller agencies in the UK as well, who handle all of the modelling side. So it's very much not me. It's not just me. I show up and do my job, but I'm a driving force. Like I'm a bit of a grafter, and I really like to work hard. I like to be out there and working hard, but it's so important to have the right people in your corner. And I think the right people who understand your mission as well. The reason that I love Moda so much is because they are PR with a purpose. So they won't take anyone on, a client, anyone who isn't purpose driven for them, who they feel passionately about. And for me, that's really important. It's not just about making money, it's about making a difference. And I think I'm at an age now and at a point in my career where that's my main driver. I know I can make money. Money's out there. I attract money. Money's in abundance. I'm good with that. It's about now, how do I make a difference, and how do I wake up every day and feel like I'm doing something that I not only feel passionate about, but that really impacts people's lives.
And what does your week look like? So do you have like weekly meetings with them? Like, you know, how does that all happen?
I mean, we communicate mainly by WhatsApp. When I turn my phone off flight mode after this, I'll have 15 notifications from them. It's constant. We are constantly back and forth, deliberating with different brands and agreeing what we're going to be doing. We catch up all the time, basically. And then with my modelling agencies, it's more just when the work's coming in. But in terms of what my week looks like, it is so incredibly varied. It's really hard to say. I will usually have a couple of days of modelling. I'm usually doing some variety of podcast or speaking, and then shooting social collaborations as well. So there's lots going on. I'm down in London a lot, travel a lot, and it's fun. It's really varied, which I love. I don't think I could do a 9 to 5 ever again. Well, I couldn't.
And is there any routine around that? So is there a time you get up? You know,
there is routine. It's really important to me that I stick to certain routines, like going to the gym. I go to the gym 4 times a week. My little walk to get my morning coffee at Gales, which is the new cafe in Wilmslow we were talking about before. It's amazing. Shout out to Gales. My morning walk to get my coffee is just a really big part of my ritual. I don't take my phone, and I just have that time for me, have that time to, like I spoke about before, focus on gratitude, set my intentions for the day, and just take a breath. Because I got into a really bad habit at one point of waking up, checking my phone. And I would go to bed, check my phone, wake up, check my phone, and it was so exhausting because all I was doing was working. And now I've got into a space where no one's dying. You know, it's important work, but we're not curing cancer. Everything's okay. You can take a minute, you can take a breath. You can go for your little walk and get your coffee. You can go to the gym and work out without needing to reply to an email in between sets. Like, it's okay, take a breath. So I've got a lot of balance now, which is something that I had to work really hard towards for a long time because I had absolutely no balance. But now I'm in a space where those routines are non-negotiable for me. If I don't go to the gym, I'm a terrible person.
Oh, me too.
I just can't focus on anything else. It's such a mental game for me going to the gym. And it's an interesting one, actually, because when I did suffer with disordered eating, I only ever went to the gym, like I said before, to lose weight. And now my whole focus, and I never ever thought I'd get to this place, but my whole focus is going to the gym to feel good mentally.
Yeah.
I go and lift weights and I do cardio and I do all these things that make me feel mentally incredible.
Yeah.
But I'm not taking my measurements. I don't know what I weigh.
Yeah.
I'm not focused on gains, or like I'm not looking in the mirror and like, have I got abs yet?
Yeah.
I just want to feel great.
Yeah.
I want to feel energized. I want to feel mentally in the best place that I can.
Yeah.
And I really encourage people to get in the gym for those reasons.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah.
I think quite often it doesn't go hand in hand to promote body confidence and body positivity.
Yeah.
People get it a bit mixed up that I'm trying to promote obesity or being unhealthy, and I'm not. I'm trying to promote being comfortable in your body and having the respect for your body, that you understand, that you love it enough, that you want to nourish it, that you want to move it. Because shaming people, you can't shame people into loving themselves. You can't shame people in wanting to take care of themselves. That's something that's really, really important to me, that we get that message clear.
Yeah.
That body positivity and body confidence is about helping people love themselves so they want to nourish their bodies, so they want to move their bodies, so that they are healthy and they do live long, healthy lives.
Yeah. Well, looking at you, in your face you look nourished, like your skin's incredible. So I presume you eat fairly healthy.
Yeah, I do.
What's kind of your principles around eating now, and things like that? Because I can see it in your face, like you're glowing.
Thank you. I mean, I've just been to Bali for 3 weeks,
Oh,
so it could be the Bali
okay.
glow. But I did have an avo smash from Gales this morning.
Yeah.
So my principles are everything in moderation, and I try to keep a good balance. Mm-hmm. But again, I am very focused on not getting too... I have to be very careful that I don't start counting calories, or I don't start thinking, well, because I've eaten that, now I have to go to the gym.
Yeah.
I have to
watch.
get that bat out and whack that thought out of my head, because that's just really not a good space for me to go to. So I just focus on nourishment. I just focus on eating as clean as I can, because it makes me feel incredible.
Yeah.
And every so often I have a day where I eat absolute crap all day, and I wake up the next day and I feel horrific.
You do. It's like a hangover,
It's
isn't it?
awful.
Like,
I've got no energy. I don't want to go to the gym. I've got no motivation to do my work. And like you say, I can see it in my face, I can see it in my eyes. I can tell that I've not been taking care of myself. And then my body gives up as a result.
Yeah.
I've actually got endometriosis, and I have to be very, very careful that I keep on top of my nutrition, because the minute I don't, I went to Madrid last week for a few days and I ate all the red meat and I drank all the red wine and I had beer, and I just didn't nourish my body, and I had an almighty endometriosis attack. So for me, it's just another way of loving my body and making sure that I'm being careful and I'm giving it the love that it needs.
And just touching on endometriosis, which is a very underestimated illness, I think, unless you know someone that's had it. When did you get endometriosis then?
So I got my endo diagnosis 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So endo's a really difficult one, because you can't actually get a diagnosis until you have the surgery. So it's one of those things that they think you've got it, and then you go in for what's called your laparoscopy surgery to remove the endo, and that's when you get your diagnosis.
Yeah.
So I got a diagnosis of stage 3 endometriosis, which was really quite severe.
Yeah.
But I was really, really lucky. I lived in Australia at the time, and that is important to note, because the healthcare system out there is incredible. But when I first started to get symptoms, within 6 months of my first symptoms, went to the doctor, and the symptoms were severe. I mean, I'd got to a point where I had blacked out on the bathroom floor in pain.
Wow.
I'd been throwing up for about half an hour. I honestly felt like someone had broken into my house and was stabbing me to death.
Wow.
I was screaming, sobbing, and I've donated a liver. Like, I've got a fairly good pain tolerance. This was like, I would donate a liver every day of my life versus having endometriosis. It's really, really awful. You cannot underestimate how painful it is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't let up. I think that's the hardest thing. So for me, an average endometriosis attack, which is what I call it because it feels like an attack, usually lasts about 4 hours. And it's not like it comes on and then it's less strong. It's just solid pain for 4 hours, and then you are tender for 4 days. So it's really awful. And I'd gone to the doctors and explained these things, and I was so incredibly lucky that the GP that I saw in Australia said, I think you've got endometriosis. Because in the UK, the average diagnosis takes 8 years. And the first GP that I spoke to said to me, I think you've got endometriosis, and I'm going to put you in for a specialist referral. So I was incredibly lucky. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about making sure that women know that when something like that is going on in your body, it's not normal. Period pain that makes you, even if you're screwed up in a ball on the floor, is not normal. Something is wrong, and you have to advocate for yourself. And if you're going to your GP and they're saying, no, you're fine, take some paracetamol,
Yeah.
and you know it's not normal, you have to push for that specialist
Yeah.
referral. You have to say to them, no, something is wrong and I want a referral.
Yeah.
You have to really fight for your own health. Because
Yeah.
I was very lucky, and within 2 months of that first GP meeting, I had my surgery.
Yeah. And is that the laser surgery?
No, so it's called the laparoscopy,
Yeah.
where they basically
They remove it
remove
all.
the endo. Yeah, so they
Yeah.
go in via 4 different
Yeah.
incisions
Yeah.
and remove as much as they can.
Yeah, because I mentioned, so my sister had that, and then
Yes.
eventually, post children, had a hysterectomy. And yeah, they said it was like picking chewing gum. Like it, yeah. So what's your? So you probably have to keep quite healthy anyway, because of your liver, do you?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I was going to say, can you have a drink? But you can, but in moderation.
Yeah, I mean, I could drink anyone under the table before, so I can't drink like that anymore, but I can still drink like a normal person.
Yeah.
But I actually don't. I don't drink that much anymore because I think that's just been in my 30s, but I feel horrendous for like 4 days.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it.
I think we're all more aware of it now anyway, aren't we? I don't think, I think the sober culture is becoming much more prevalent
100%,
anyway.
yeah. I think at some point I will 100% give up alcohol.
Yeah.
I'd say at the moment I probably have 2 hangovers a year.
Yeah.
And on each of those hangovers, I think, no,
I'm never doing it again.
But I think I'm nearly there.
Yeah.
I used to always think, I'm never doing it again, and then do it the next night. But now I think, no, I think I'm nearly there. I'm giving up.
Yeah. So we're nearly at a close, but a couple of things that have just popped up that I want to ask you about as well are, you've created this personal brand, which is Sophie with Love.
Yes.
You've got, for those people not watching on YouTube, a lovely pink tint to your hair. How have you curated like the personal brand, like the look and feel when you look at Instagram, and things like that? How did that, because it feels like it was quite organic. So how did that?
It has been really organic, and people ask me this question and I sort of think it's just evolved over time.
Yeah.
If I had to start now and be like, okay, I'm going to design a brand, that's a very difficult thing to do. But when it's just you, I feel like if you stay true to yourself, that's the most important thing you can do. I'm a very visual person anyway. I like things to be aesthetic. But in terms of the content that I choose to put out there, I don't put anything out there that doesn't feel really good to me.
Yeah.
So I get so many brands come through every day and want to collaborate, and we say no to 10 brands a day sometimes that just aren't the right fit for what we're trying to achieve and the message that we're trying to drive forward. They're not the right fit.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, not just always chasing the money, and actually really knowing your worth is important, but also knowing that you've got to stay on mission. And sometimes the big shiny dollars can be shiny, but that's not the point, because more will come if you just stay focused on your own lane. So I'm really big on that. And in terms of the personal branding, I can never dye my hair blonde again. I've had it pink for 8 years now.
Yeah.
It's a really big part of it. It's a big part of modelling. It's what I'm recognised for, really. It is a big part of it. And everything is pink, everything is colourful. And I just try to keep it fun. I think that's the overwhelming message is like, can we all just lighten up a little bit and just have more fun? Because we take it so seriously. We get so caught up in the fact that we've got cellulite and we've got to go around the pool.
Yeah.
And none of us are getting out alive.
Yeah.
And this is what I try to remind people of. It's like we are so preoccupied with our saggy boobs that we forget that this is it. This is life. Like, you don't get it again. Forget your boobs.
Yeah.
Go and live your life.
Yeah. And you talked about brands there. Is there a dream brand you'd love to work with that you haven't yet?
There's lots of brands that I am just starting to work with that are a little bit of a dream. So Simply Be is a really big one for me because they are so purpose-driven and mission-driven in the same direction as me. I did Marks & Spencer's at the start of this year, which was an absolute dream.
Amazing.
And I would love to do, I think my biggest focus right now, I would love to do a big, in terms of modelling, a big window campaign for one of the big lingerie brands. So whether it be Ann Summers or Boo or lounge underwear, I think seeing my scar on a big campaign like that would mean an awful lot. It's something that I did a lot of in Australia, but I've not cracked in the UK yet. So that's definitely a modelling goal.
And just your last few minute tips. Top 3 skincare tips.
Do you know what? I keep my skincare really, really simple. And people are always amazed because I don't put too much into it. For me, nutrition is everything. The minute my nutrition falls off, my skin is a mess. So that's number 1. And water. And I know these are the most basic things in the world, but they are the keys for me, and they're the biggest thing that I notice. Particularly as you get older and you've got fine lines coming through. If I am not hydrated, I can tell in my face. That's really, really important. And then the main thing, the main thing that I cannot live without is a really good hyaluronic acid serum. So I think it's so important find products that work for you
Yeah.
and work for your skin type.
Yeah.
And for me, that is something that my skin just like drinks it up. I've got really dry skin.
Yeah.
And I use a variety. People always say like, what products do you use? But
Yeah.
there's so many that I
Yeah.
have and so many that I use. But I think skin and your skincare and your body as well is one of the most important
give me
things
some
that you can
tips on
focus
that
on.
because I'm always looking for like lovely things for you.
SPF is the key, and I
Yeah.
think we don't focus enough on this in the UK. But living
Yeah.
in Australia for such a long time, everyone is lathered in SPF 50
Yeah.
every day because otherwise you're going to
Yeah.
age. So I use the ultraviolet SPFs, and they
Yeah.
are one of my favourite products.
Okay.
I use them as an SPF. I use them as a primer and a base as well
Yeah.
underneath my makeup, and I won't go a day without them. I absolutely love them. They're one of the best things to come to market.
Yeah.
And I feel like we just need to be shouting more about SPF because that is the main thing that we can do to help slow down aging.
Yeah. And do you journal? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is
Love
that
journaling.
prompted journaling, free journaling?
I do a bit of both. I find that if I'm incredibly stressed, then I need to use prompts.
Yeah.
Because I can't clear my mind enough to
Yeah.
be able to just write freely.
Yeah.
However, most days I will just journal what is in my head.
Yeah.
And I could not live without journaling. As
Yeah.
much as I couldn't live without lifting weights,
Yeah.
I could not live without getting everything out of my head and down
Yeah.
onto paper. It
Yeah.
is the most therapeutic thing.
Yeah.
And when people tell me they don't journal, I'm like, how do you function?
Oh, I'm the same. Like
How?
it's like a mindfulness for me. It's like
Yes.
a meditation. Like
Yes.
I have to. Have you got a best friend lined up to burn your diaries if anything? I have.
Please will you burn my diaries if anything happens? You can get a key from my next door neighbour. I'm just popping into a house and need to burn her diaries.
immediately. Oh, well, listen, you've been an absolute delight to have on the podcast, and I could definitely probably talk to you for a lot longer. But the final question, as we always do, is it's called Anything is Possible. What does anything is possible mean to you?
I think knowing, like I said earlier, that we do just get this one shot and that your attitude towards your life is everything. If you have a good attitude and you know that you can wake up every day and you have the power to change the world and you have the power to go after your dreams and stop playing it small, then anything is possible.
Brilliant. Oh, Sophie, thank you so much.
Thank you for having
Give
me.
a big hug to Oscar from us.
I will do.
And let's post a little picture of him when we share the podcast.
100%.
And where can people find you on social media?
Soph with Love on Instagram and on TikTok.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.